As a result of Roe v. Wade being overturned, we wanted to bring awareness to the struggles and heartbreaks that women go through on a daily basis. So, we gathered a group of actors and allowed them to share their stories.
There are so many reasons why I think people should come see the show, but one of the things I think the show is about is human connection and shared healing and shared trauma, but also fighting to understand each other. Whether you have a uterus, had a uterus, never had a uterus, these are stories about experience, and I think everybody should learn from each other.
We talk about so many issues that need to be discussed more, and everyone who sees the show leaves taking away something with them. It has moved people, it has changed people, and I hope it can do the same for you. And let's start these conversations.
Come out and experience an inspiring night of theater and support our cause.
Welcome, everyone, to the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Welcome those who are here with us in person and those who are online watching us. We are a progressive religious community guided but not bound by the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism and its 6 principles, or 6 sources, rather. I want to welcome you. As you saw, we have a wonderful event this next Sunday called From Uterus, and as they said, it's not just for folks with uteruses or who have had uteruses, but we all have come from a uterus, so it's for all of us. And so we want to invite you. There's information on our website about that to register and RSVP to that. Speaking of which, we have a lot of information on our website. We've been working hard for the last couple of months to update it and keep it current. So if you are watching this or sitting in here and want to know what those 7 principles are, those 6 principal sources are, you can go there and find all the information, what events we're doing. It's in pretty good shape there. And on the 15th, we are also kicking off our high school Our Whole Lives program, which is our comprehensive sexuality curriculum. And so if you know anyone who is in 10th, 11th, or 12th grade and needs to learn that stuff, and they do if they're in those grades, sign them up. That's also on our website as well. Today is our re-kickoff of our children's RE program during this morning. So after the Time for All Ages, we'll go upstairs. If your child is not registered for this session, there's a QR code on the back of the bulletin or a link in the online OOS to sign your child up for that so we know who's coming and whatnot. And let's see, other announcements. Oh, continuing with our conversation about sexuality and those things as we kind of go on that. On January 29th at 1 p.m., there will be a general workshop on sexual orientation and gender identity that is led by our OWL, our Whole Lives, trained and certified facilitators for all adults, 18 over. We ask that you come to that. We do need people to register for that because of the nature of it. We want to know who's there and who's not there, and so you can find that information on our website, or if you have a Realm profile, that's even better. And this afternoon, working backwards here, I guess, is our Odyssey project, celebrating our own Gabor Kiss at 12:45. Our Odyssey project is great. It's where we ask some of our more seasoned members to share their stories and their lives with us, and it's a wonderful opportunity to hear how this fellowship and how Unitarian Universalism has touched these folks. So we ask that you guys come to that. Also, the Lunch Bunch is gathering at 11:15 at Nona's. With all of that said, it's a lot of housekeeping. I'm going to throw it to you, Reverend Joel.
Having grown up a Unitarian Universalist, I always liked the symbol of a chalice with a flame. The congregation I grew up in wasn't too sure about having symbols or even symbols that somebody might light with a candle. When I got older, I was in a meeting at one point in the Worship Arts Committee, or as they called it, the Worship Committee. And I proposed that we light a chalice in the service like we do here. And one member said, "What? Catholics light chalice, light candles?" And I said, "They do? They light chalices?" And he said, No. It's just Unitarian Universalists don't need to have candles. And I was confused. And he said, because it'd be potpourri, which is not a nice word. I had never heard the word in my Unitarian Universalist congregation. I thought he was talking about potpourri, that really smelly stuff in my mother's bathroom. All the women are laughing, yeah. Little flower petals and herbs and scents. I was really confused, and everybody else in the committee meeting started to laugh. "Oh, light the chalice," he said. It was fine. And we bought a chalice and lit it a following Sunday. Everybody was a little nervous about it. What might happen if we did something that had ritual in it? Now, if you were to take that chalice or the chalice lighting out of the service in my home church in Columbus, Ohio today, they'd be like, "Oh, no, you're not doing that. Bring that back. We're going to light a chalice." Same thing happened in a congregation, a similar story in a congregation I served in California for a while. We'd had the middle schoolers had stayed overnight at church as one of their activities. They'd had a class, and it had gone much of the evening, and then they were just hanging out, and they were having fun, and we'd fed dinner. We'd had a spaghetti dinner, and I was working with the advisors. We were cleaning up the social hall and the dirty plates and all of that, and the kids had gone into the sanctuary, and they were kind of hanging out and just enjoying being with each other. Well, it turns out they were doing a little more than that. One of the youth group advisors went to check on them, and then she walked back in a couple minutes later, and she said, "Joel, you better come to the sanctuary." I walked into the sanctuary, and the big chalice, there was a big chalice. It was almost as big as this, and it was made of porcelain, and it had been made in Romania by their sister Unitarian congregation in Romania. And it was in pieces on the floor. Now, this was a big deal because this congregation had just started lighting a chalice about 4 months before, after a lot of discussion. And Gloria, who was the advisor who came in to tell me that the chalice was in pieces on the floor, I came in and I looked at it, and the kids were looking like, "Oh," and I said, "So what happened?" And they said, "Well, we started playing Toss the Chalice." Well, that wasn't going to work out well, was it? Gloria looked at me, and she looked at the pieces on the floor, and she knelt to pick up the pieces of the chalice, and she began to cry. She was surprised, and I was surprised, and even some of the kids were surprised because she had not wanted to see anybody lighting candles in church, lighting a chalice. But then she realized, as she was picking the pieces up, how much she loved her congregation and what that symbol had come to mean to her in just a few months. Just a symbol, but a symbol. And as she picked the pieces up, she looked up at me and kind of wiped the tears away, and she said, "Wait a minute, Joel, you're one of the people who really wanted this. I'm crying. Why aren't you crying?" This, by the way, is the children's chalice. Goes with them when they leave for classes. We're going to light our chalice now, symbol of our faith when the people have gathered, and I invite you to say the words of our covenant as we light our chalice. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. I love this next hymn. It's number 131, Love Will Guide Us. And I invite you to stand in body or in spirit as we sing together. Love will guide us. Well, I'd like to tell a very short story, and if there's anybody who's a child, young at spirit, who would like to come up and help me with that now, I'd be really great. It'd be really great to have you join me. Yeah, come on up. I don't have to do this alone. Have you ever talked about the story of the chalice in your classes, where it comes from? Doesn't sound familiar? So the chalice is a very, very old symbol. It comes from about 500 years ago. There was a theologian and a minister. His name was John Hus, and in his language, his name was Jan. They didn't make a j sound with his name, so Jan Hus. And in those days, when churches got together, they sometimes would have communion, but only the minister or the priest would drink from the communion cup. Well, this minister, Jan Hus, thought everybody should be able to drink from the cup together, that everybody should be able to have a special meal together. Well, that really upset the more old-fashioned church bosses. There were bosses, they had bishops, they had cardinals, and you had to do it the one way, and if you didn't do it their way, they would send soldiers. In fact, they'd get into fights. The people in Jan Hus's land, in a place now called the Czech Republic, and were having a fight with some of these folks. And at one point, they decided to call a truce and talk about things. Maybe we can find a way to settle our differences without having to fight. And so Jan traveled with a white flag, went across the battle lines to talk with the other guys. And when he got there, they said, "We changed our mind. We don't want to have a truce." And they didn't even agree to his what they were called safe passage. So what they did was they burned him at the stake, which is a terrible thing to do. Well, the people back at home were really, really angry about that. And because of what happened, they created a symbol. It was the cup, like your cup, like this one that you have in class. And it looked very much like it. A chalice, something you could drink out of. But instead of having liquid in it, it had a flame in it. And the flame represented what Jan Hus had sacrificed, but it also represented the light of truth, the light that we find together when we are in community. And that's a story from 500 years ago. And we've been using that symbol of a chalice and a flame from all those centuries. So by the time when I was a kid, I remember in our reclass, it was always pretty special who got to get the matches out and light the candle, light the chalice and the flame in the class. Now, I didn't light this one this morning, so do you think we ought to light it now so you can take it to class? You want to help me do that? We are so glad that you're here with us. We hope that the light of your lives always shines brightly as a part of this community, that the chalice and the flame that we have is one that you know of as love and support.
All right, the congregation is going to sing us out, and we're going to go to class, okay? Go. Hit it. We have a special notice to the congregation at this time of board action. Laurent Comez, President of the Board of Trustees, will speak now.
We celebrate milestones, we celebrate passages, celebrate in a very specific meaning of the term, especially this morning. Celebrate in the sense of returning to and practicing a form of recognition. A birthday party is a celebration because it is a return to and practice of a specific kind of recognition. So are milestones when they are about joys and when they are about sorrows. And that's the meaning of the word that we're not accustomed to. Important this morning, though, to note the importance of our return to this ritual of milestones and how it acknowledges that all of us have moments in our lives when we've experienced significant change or significant accomplishment or significant loss. I have served 10 congregations, and most of them have at some time or another found it necessary to tell a member that they couldn't come anymore. Kept me up all weekend, even though the decision had made, thinking about what it would be to tell you to light a candle for it. You chose the name Universalist recently to add to the name, the description of yourselves as a congregation. And you've meant it, I can tell. This is a milestone or a passage that we would just as soon not have to experience, and it is one made after much heartbreaking conversation. And it is clear that the many, many leaders who over a number of years wrestled hard with tears did so with the utmost care for everybody involved. And though you aspire to be Universalist in every way possible, there are times we must acknowledge our human limitations. And that may be the biggest part of this milestone this morning, and the reason I like this particular candle. Another passage that I would like to share this morning comes from Brooke Donaldson. For Christmas, Candace got the Braille edition of both hymnals, which I think is lovely. If you'd like to see what they look like, she will happily show you after the service. Now Candace can fully participate and sing along. Spirit of life, present, transcendent in all of these gathered faces. How precious, how privileged it is to see you, to see them, and standing up here. How grateful we are for one another. How grateful we are to find new ways to welcome people. Find new ways for each of us to fully participate. Find new ways of being within ourselves, that our own participation becomes richer, becomes deeper. Grateful for this community and it's the resources that we and those who've come before have given to make this possible. Our children leave from here over weeks, years, the end of childhood, and take something from here, something beautiful. And they tell us later, returning, visiting, how the world seems brighter, beautiful, more possible.
May these great aspirations we have for a world in which there is peace and justice for all, a world in which all are beloved on any street they go, may we always hold close to this aspiration. And when those days come that we fail even to reach for the aspiration well, or the days come when we find ourselves with no choice but to do anything except what seems right toward those aspirations. May we find our way to forgiveness. May we find renewed hope to make the changes we aspire to make. Find new wisdom, new strength. And so that as we do this as community, we find we have modeled it for every single one of us and our children for their own times of struggle, their own times of success, their own times of renewed and greater aspirations. Amen. So be it. Blessed be.
I invite you to sing with me. I invite you to sing with me number 95, There Is More Love Somewhere. It's here on the screen. It's on the screen on a live stream or in the books if you like to look at the books. I invite you to stand in body or spirit as you would like. I'm grateful to Brent Geyer this morning. He is filling in as we are in our music director search here this week and next. So one of as I've been thinking about this weekend and these conversations that your board and I and your committee and ministry are having with you, I'm thinking about they're two big issues that come to my mind on a day like this. One of them is, what is it like when the chalice breaks? What is it like when your faith is not what you thought it was, or doesn't meet your expectations? You know, that happened to me once early on in theological school. I was about 27 years old, a bit ornery, I guess that's fair to say, pretty strongly opinionated. And I went to I was visiting some of our congregations, and I was meeting all kinds of great folks, but I was also meeting a lot in theological school, all kinds of folks from all kinds of other religions. And I had kind of this anti-Christian thing going, and some of our UU congregations, and I'll speak for myself, the one I grew up in, and me especially, could be pretty anti-Christian. I kind of thought of people who practiced it as maybe mentally deficient somehow. I'm not proud of that. That's it's not an attractive thing. You know, I didn't choose Unitarian Universalism, though. It was something that my parents took me to when I was a child, and I was so grateful for it. It was so important in my life. So important, I went into ministry, felt called to ministry to make more congregations, to build our communities more fully. That's been the most powerful sense of my call since I really understood what Unitarian Universalism could do. But in the context of my first year of theological school, I listened to myself, and I didn't like what I was hearing. In fact, I was a little angry at first. And then I got very angry about it after I started visiting some of our congregations and hearing unapologetic, the most gratuitous insults of people who practice Christianity, of Christians. And it was breaking my heart. And then it really made me mad. I was like, is this what we do? Is this what we are? We're a whole movement of 200,000 people who gripe about what's wrong with Christianity? I don't want to be a part of that club. I don't need that. I was really angry. So I went to my feminist theology class, because one of the reasons I went to California in this particular site, feminist theology? Yeah. This was like in the 1980s, so this is a big deal. You know, a lot of theological schools, a lot of those old guys. Oh, no, well, we'll teach feminist theology. It'll be off class, and it'll be on Saturday morning at 7:30. Not where I went to school. It was a full class. At the time, I was the only male in the class, and with mostly Roman Catholic theologians, which was an intense experience. And many of them were from other cultures, Filipino, Thai, Japanese, Chinese. It was a great class. I loved being in the class. And they realized at one point that, especially for the women who were not from North America, that just my presence there was sometimes reason enough for them to sit and wait for me to approve whether they could talk or not. That's how heavy their experience had been of patriarchy, as we were calling it. And they really lovingly and carefully asked me at one point, would you be upset if we had a separate class besides this one where just the women met? And then they explained why, and it was like, no, I wouldn't be upset. You clearly have to do it. I'll just leave the class. And they were like, no, that's not what we want. Please stay in the class. But we're glad you aren't upset that we're going to meet with just the women. It's like, cool, that's fine. Please, tell me the things you can tell me. I want to hear, which they loved. And that broke something open both in me and in them, because I began talking about how frustrated I was with Unitarian Universalists and this very unattractive behavior around Christianity. Well, the Roman Catholic women from all over the world began saying, yeah, we know how you feel. We've always got a male hierarchy determining what is ethical, what isn't ethical, what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do. And they're not even following the tradition. They're actually supposed to listen to the people like in your Unitarian Universalist congregations. Really? I said to them, why do you stay? And they said, all of them actually said, because we have nowhere else to go. It's just our home. Plenty of us, others of us have left and needed to leave, and we think that's okay. We needed to stay. So I set off on a bit of a journey, and because I wasn't sure if I was going to stay or not, and I needed to figure that out. I met the nicest Jewish folks. I met the nicest Buddhists. I met the nicest Presbyterians, Episcopalians. And all of them, as I would come and say, I'm exploring, this is why I'm exploring, I'm really frustrated with the faith I come out of, the faith tradition I come out of. And to the end, they say, well, if you're looking for something that's perfect, you're not going to find it here. And that was perhaps an unusual gift to get, but it was an important one. Because at the end of my wanderings for about a half a year, I realized, no, I'm a Unitarian Universalist. I'm very much so, want to be, need to be a Unitarian Universalist. But when I discovered that first moment, I can remember sitting in a service and hearing a gratuitous slam of other people based on how they practiced their faith. It felt like a chalice of my childhood, much like the one that the children took with them. Somebody just thrown it onto the floor. It was in pieces. It was the love of people of other faiths, other patient Unitarian Universalists, even some Unitarian Universalists who were irritated with me for raising the topic because they kind of were very comfortable being snarky about Christianity. And I would tell them how much it bothered me. And they too would eventually begin helping me piece the chalice back together. So there have been times since then when it feels like the chalice fell and broke again, and I've had to piece it back together. It always feels a bit like that when a congregation has to make a decision, a congregation like this one that truly aspires to universalism. Can we be a congregation that welcomes everyone, where all are welcome and belong? That's the aspiration. That's what I hear from you. And I share it. But then to have to make a decision about a person and say, we aspire to this, but you can't come. You can't even come onto the grounds. And we'll call the police if you do. And we have to, actually. It got me to asking this next question as I thought about what does this mean for us as a people who are each of us on spiritual journeys? First thought was about suffering, pain. And I found myself turning to Buddhism, which is a bit of a surprise because I always respected, admired Buddhism. I could never practice Buddhism. I saw the Four Noble Truths and I said, oh, this is amazing. What a wonderful spiritual insight. Life has suffering in it. Life has pain in it, specifically, dukkha. There's painful things that happen and you can't make painful things not happen. Pain happens. even though as I was growing up a Unitarian Universalist, our hope was to get rid of all pain eventually someday. I was very frustrated as an undergraduate when I realized, oh, we're not going to feed the world by 1989. It's going to not happen in my lifetime. That was a bit of sadness over that for me. I really thought we might. Pain's a part of the human experience. And the second noble truth is, then there's unnecessary suffering, unnecessary pain. And that kind of pain happens when you are become attached to the way things are, the way things ought to be, or to pleasures that you have. As somebody who has experienced addiction to alcohol, I can certainly understand that almost mad kind of longing for the physical and mental effects of a drug. And then the way not to suffer unnecessarily, not to escape pain, but not to suffer unnecessarily, is to become unattached, to not chase after the next buzz, not chase after the perfect congregation, not chase after the one aspiration as an unchanging and infallible goal. And that made sense. And then there's the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path, and that the whole practice one can use as a Buddhist. Now, I probably don't have it perfect because I'm actually not a practicing Buddhist. And one of the reasons was at the time when I discovered Buddhism, I had an infant child in my arms. And that little baby I knew from Science and Reason, because I grew up a Unitarian Universalist humanist. It was all about science and reason. And I knew from Science and Reason that baby needed to attach to me. I was the at-home parent. And he saw me almost every moment of his life. And I was attached to him, and I didn't want to unattach. And I wanted him attached to me, knowing I'd always be there, knowing I loved him. So I couldn't really be a Buddhist because it wasn't quite it for me. Yeah, I can't non-attach to everything. I'm going to come in and say, hi, child, and walk away and scoop my baby up and tell him how much I love him and plant kisses all over his head. Although I've had some Buddhists say to me, no, I think you understand Buddhism. There's a compassionate aspect to it where, yeah, you do make deep, deep connection. So we aspire to this. In fact, we aspire to deep, deep connection as Unitarian Universalists. And it's painful when something breaks for us. Whether it breaks because we have maybe a visitor who's been visiting for months and is like, oh, is this it? And then they realize, not quite it. I'm going to keep on my journey. And I know I always feel a little bit of like, oh, I wish it had been us. And learn to be happy that they're still on the journey and maybe we've been helpful along the way. Terribly painful when a longtime member says, I got to take a step back. Something has happened in their spiritual path, their relationship with a congregation. And that happens. Actually, it happens a lot during interim ministries where members will say, I really loved the minister who was there before, and I don't like you, Joel. And for the most part, they can admit, and I know I don't like you it's not rational. I don't like you because you're not Allison, or I don't like you because you're not Sam. I don't like you because you're not Paul Carnes or whoever it was years and years ago. And I get that. Interims, we get a thick skin because we know largely it's not about us. You've known me, 4 months? And it's okay. It's just as well. That's part of what being an interim is. It's like, I don't like you, Joel. That's fine. They're good. Get it over with me, and maybe that opens the door for the next minister. Or conversely, I'm so relieved you're not Allison. Or I'm so relieved you're not Paul Carnes or Sam or, that previous minister, whoever they were. And then a sense of disappointment when I go because I'm an interim and maybe even turn out not to be perfect.
as all ministers have their strengths and their weaknesses. When the chalice breaks, it's painful and it's unexpected. And there's this process of putting the pieces back together again. And they come back together in new ways, different ways. And it generally takes the friends and congregational life to help put the pieces back together. And in my experience, when my chalice is broken and I found new ways to put it together, my Unitarian Universalism is deeper. It's a richer experience. It's more resilient in tough times. The other experience around this, I know for Unitarian Universalists, I thought about telling the children of the story about the pilgrims. I decided not to because it would have gotten into too much history. Those of us who were older probably, as I mentioned in a service a month and a half ago, if we were boy kids in kindergarten, we made that funny little hat with a buckle on it, or if we were girl identified, we would have those funny little bib things on our shoulders. Pilgrims, because Thanksgiving and all of that. And the Pilgrims, the Pilgrim Church, it did have a split at about 1810 where the more Orthodox believers became Congregationalists, but the parish itself, to this day, is Unitarian Universalist. First parish of Plymouth, Unitarian Universalist, founded in 1602 in Scrooby, England, technically. And as pilgrims as well as Puritans, we think of ourselves as those sort of New England Unitarians that would have town meetings and make all of our decisions all together in a room. And one of the things that happens, especially with a congregation like this, you've grown, that started out as a fellowship, a smaller group. You've grown, you're 310, 320 members. You aspire to be 450 members. You all voted on a strategic plan that's going to get you there. And one of the things about this moment is that you had a board and a committee on ministry and a minister together, as your bylaws require, make a very significant decision on your behalf. And it's one in which it's not really one you can revisit as a congregation, both because there's ethical and moral reasons, but also because, can you imagine 400 people in a room, say, trying to decide the color of the carpet or the paint? I was, right, yeah. Yeah, that's not going to go out. You know what color you're going to get. When I was, I'd started a congregation in Littleton, Colorado called the Columbine Unitarian Universalist Church. And when we finally got we got a building, its story is very similar to what happened here with this congregation. A member said, "Oh my gosh, this could be a really good deal." And the member actually made the offer on him, I think bought the mansion, and then somehow made a deal for the congregation then to buy it. Very similar thing happened with this congregation in Littleton, Colorado, where a member who had been a real estate agent saw this daycare center, this large daycare center came open. It was came on the market. She called up the owner right away and she said, "So it's for sale?" And he said, "Yeah." She said, "How much do you want for it?" He said, "Well," she said, "I'll give you $350." He said, "What? Unitarians, huh? Okay, done." Now, a verbal contract's not a contract in real estate, but she called the board up and said, "I just made an offer on her behalf for $350. You want to go look at it?" And they did. And they went in and saw it and said, "This is great." And she said, "You probably should vote tonight to put the offer out." So they did. And they delivered it the next morning, which is great because an hour after he got that offer, and he hadn't signed it, but he had the offer in his hand, another offer came in from another church for $450. He was one of those old style Republicans
who was like, well, I made a deal, even though he wasn't legally obligated. He said, I made a deal with you guys, $350, and he signed it. It's pretty cool. So there wasn't a large, long process, even though the congregation still did get to vote in this case. But when you're smaller, you can make decisions and make them fast. And as you're larger, it takes more of a process, and you entrust more of your decisions. When we, and I'm telling you all of that because I remember when it came time to choose the carpet color on the floor and paint the sanctuary. Back in Columbus, we did have a congregational vote on the color of the paints when we did a repainting. And I would describe it as, okay, everybody brought a sample tin of their favorite color. They all poured it into a big vat of white paint. They stirred it all together, and they ended up with a color-ish, kind of muddy color. And in Columbine, because it was a small congregation, they had to entrust the decision, all kinds of decisions to all kinds of people. And 3 women made the decision about what chairs to get, what walls to paint the sanctuary, what color everything would be. And it had this beautiful Southwest theme. When we started painting the walls, it was sage green and with accents of terracotta orange. And a couple of the guys came in and they were like, they struggled not to drop the F-bomb. They were, oh my God, what are these colors? It was beautiful when it was done. It was so beautiful that even though we hadn't budgeted for it, other groups like yoga groups and an ashram came to this congregation and said, it's such a beautiful space. We would like to rent it from you. They hadn't put anything on the market. So there's that developmental process you're going through as a congregation of, in this case, learning to trust your leaders have worked very hard, done the best they possibly can. Leaders that you've elected. You'll have many more opportunities like this as a congregation to trust your leaders. And about that aspiration, that universalist aspiration, that somehow, some way, someday, everyone will be welcome. We will be able to take everyone and make that spiritual journey to whatever it is, that promised land is we think we're headed toward as Unitarian Universalists, however we would describe it. I hope we keep that aspiration set before us. We're people who love freedom, freedom to create connections, to know ourselves more deeply by knowing one another more deeply. And we do that knowing, we befriend one another so deeply because it gives us that most deep and profound kind of freedom. That fundamental knowledge that I am not free until all of you are free. None of us is free if one of us is not fully free. We may not see that heaven, that promised land in our lifetimes, but you've been on that journey. It's why I was excited to come here. It's why I'm excited about what's going to happen in your next chapter as a congregation. Keep on being the Morristown UU Fellowship. Keep on working for freedom, even when it's hard, even when it's a bit of a struggle, even with its losses. The world needs you. Oh, look at that. There's the offertory. Yeah, I don't want to miss that. Especially since our offering is split 50-50 today with the Hungarian Unitarian Church's ministry. They're caring for Ukrainian refugees. They've got even more than they had 6 months ago. And 6 months ago, they had well over 1 million refugees that they were helping to care for. If you're online or you have your cell phone, you can donate via text to give number 73256.
Follow it with the keyword MUF. Or you can give online, muuf.org/give. We take our offering. Let's sing as we go into the end of our service and returning to the world that's needing us. Sing number 1018, Come and Go With Me.
Into that land and take the light of love and hope and aspiration from this place. And if the light feels dim or weak, know we will be here together again through the week and again next Sunday. Go in peace. Be in peace. Go with love. See you next week.